Number 4.
Denver, I moved them down. 9-game winning streak, but it's a lot of one-score games, and they could have lost to Washington. They have trailed in all 12 games this season. I mean, if you told me a high seed lost in the first round of the playoffs, I think we'd all go, Denver? I just don't think their offense is even enough. There are times like this week when Washington moved the ball up and down the field. That's troubling. You hope it's just a one-off. The Rams played. Their defense stunk this weekend. I have Denver at 4.
Let's get straight to the heart of it. The very notion that the Los Angeles Rams were ever considered the definitive best team in the NFL, coupled with an admission that their defense was imperfect, perfectly highlights a crucial and often overlooked principle of professional football. Simply possessing an explosive offense or a suffocating defense does not and cannot guarantee a season-long parade of shutout victories and 35-point offensive explosions every single week. The league's inherent parity and the weekly grind demand a fundamental acknowledgement. You must have wiggle room for imperfection. You also have to permit other players, other coaches, and other franchises to have their moments in the spotlight, to execute at a high level on any given Sunday. Marcus Mariota delivered a performance that demands recognition. He played an awesome, high-caliber game. Cliff Kingsbury is, without a doubt, a brilliant offensive architect, a coordinator of immense creativity, and a play caller who can scheme players open. He had the requisite tools at his disposal, a weapon like Deebo Samuel, a dynamic running back, and a receiver of Terry McLaurin's caliber. On the other side, Dan Quinn possesses a defensive mind that commands respect. While reports suggest he's taken a step back in daily operations this season, his deep strategic knowledge, forged in part through years of battling Sean Payton's schemes, undoubtedly contributed to the game plan designed to disrupt the Denver Broncos' offensive flow. What I witnessed from the Broncos this past Sunday was thoroughly impressive. It was a high-stakes, quality football game. My expectations for any defensive unit, no matter how talented, never include the assumption they will consistently and completely neutralize an opponent for 4 quarters, especially when that opponent fields a versatile and seasoned quarterback like Marcus Mariota. Having observed Mariota's career arc, particularly when he finds himself in a system that complements his skills, I view him as a mobile archetype within a specific quarterback tier, a category that includes players like Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones. While those quarterbacks have mobility, Mariota was initially scouted as a potential prototype for the modern, dual-threat playmaker, a precursor to the era of Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen, though his career path diverged significantly. That latent capability remains. Within the right ecosystem, with a tailored supporting cast and a coaching staff that believes in his skill set, a franchise could reasonably make the calculation. We can build with this player. He can be our starter. We can win meaningful games with him under center. He is not merely a desperation option or a placeholder where the strategy is simply to hope for the best. In this specific regard, I would group him with Darnold, Jones, and Baker Mayfield, quarterbacks who, when situated correctly, can function as competent, winning starters. His profile requires nuanced consideration. The mobility that defines his game suggests a potentially shorter physical prime compared to traditional pocket passers, but it simultaneously introduces a volatile element that is intrinsically difficult for defenses to game plan for with absolute certainty. This challenge is arguably amplified when facing a backup with this athletic profile, as the sample size of current tape is smaller and the strategic tendencies less defined. You aren't preparing for the known quantities of a Mahomes or a Jackson, but you must account for the unknown. What is this specific player capable of pulling off in a critical moment? This duality explains the occasional breathtaking sequences from Mariota where he unleashes a perfect deep ball or escapes pressure for a monumental gain, moments that are immediately followed by stretches of play that firmly remind you of his backup status. This oscillation between brilliance and limitation is the hallmark of that particular quarterback stratum. Therefore, it is an inevitable reality of a 17-game season that a team like the Washington Commanders, playing at home in the national spotlight of Sunday Night Football following a holiday break, will rise to the occasion and push a contender like the Broncos to the absolute limit. These performances are woven into the very fabric of the NFL. The fascinating element here, and I will use the Green Bay Packers as a comparative case study, given my general support for them, lies in the seemingly incongruent application of evaluative logic by certain analysts. The analyst in question expressed renewed skepticism about the Broncos, consequently moving them down from the number 2 spot in his power rankings. I had previously raised an eyebrow at that exact second-place positioning, not out of a vehement disagreement with the ordinal number itself, but from a place of genuine curiosity. It felt like a ranking worth scrutinizing, rather than blindly accepting. His own evaluation of the Packers has been a spectacle of dramatic fluctuation. Anointed as the league's best early on, then plummeting completely out of the top 10 for a considerable period, followed by a post-game take questioning Jordan Love's fundamental talent, only to now execute a full pivot to proclaiming Love as elite and the Packers' offensive issues as permanently fixed. A clear-eyed examination of the Packers' recent ledger is instructive. They secured a victory over the New York Giants, a franchise that is objectively terrible this season, in a contest that was undecided until the final moments. They defeated a Minnesota Vikings squad that is an organizational mess from top to bottom. And, most significantly, they earned an excellent statement win over the Detroit Lions, a game I found utterly compelling and considered the best of the recent holiday slate, featuring truly elite quarterback play from Jordan Love. However, a sobering reality check is necessary. The Detroit Lions, as of this moment, are not a playoff team. They are not currently positioned as a top-tier conference contender. Therefore, reeling off 3 consecutive victories against teams that would not qualify for the postseason if they started today does not, in my analytical framework, constitute definitive, ironclad proof that all prior offensive maladies are now fixed. A reasonable counter-argument could be, but your Broncos barely squeaked by the Commanders, and Washington is a playoff team. This is a fair and valid point, one I acknowledge and incorporate into the overall assessment. However, critical contextual distinctions exist. The Commanders benefit from significant organizational stability in their coaching philosophy and roster construction. Even operating with a backup quarterback, this is a franchise that reached the NFC Championship game just last season and had every legitimate reason to believe they were constructing a sustainable contender. This is not a franchise in utter disarray or engaged in a total teardown. They have also navigated a challenging injury landscape throughout the year, with key absences varying in significance from week to week. Had the Broncos' victory taken the form of a 35-7 blowout, my conclusion would have been far more dismissive. They dominated a backup quarterback on a reeling team going nowhere. This tells us little. But that is emphatically not what transpired. Watching that game unfold in real time, I observed a Washington Commanders team executing at a high level, demonstrating sound coaching on both sides of the ball, and competing with the intensity and precision of a legitimate playoff-caliber squad. That is the opponent I was evaluating. Consequently, the Broncos' victory, a tense, back-and-forth affair where they demonstrated poise, managed critical situations effectively, and, from my recollection, generally controlled the tempo and field position for the majority of the contest, transforms into a substantial and positive data point. It was a quality win against a quality opponent playing good football. The logical inconsistency emerges when evaluation standards are applied selectively. If the Packers' victories over a quarterback-needy Vikings team and a dysfunctional Giants squad, led by an interim coach, are deemed sufficient evidence for a significant upward trajectory, with the Lions' win rightly celebrated as the crown jewel, then there exists no coherent, consistent rationale for watching the Broncos' performance against a competitive, well-coached Commanders team and concluding they warrant a demotion. This selective application of logic becomes even more puzzling when considering the Broncos' immediately preceding result, a decisive victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. The central critique surrounding the Denver Broncos for much of this season has orbited around the perceived limitations of their offensive unit. The persistent narrative has been, the offense isn't good enough to carry them against elite competition. In this specific game against Washington, we witnessed quarterback Bo Nix elevate his level of play, delivering what was arguably one of his most complete and impressive professional performances to date. To observe that tangible step forward in offensive execution and quarterback development, and then to respond with increased concern and diminished confidence in the team, strikes me as logically perplexing. This game had the opposite effect on me. It made me feel more confident about the Denver Broncos' potential and trajectory. I stand by that assessment. To illustrate the point, consider a hypothetical alternative outcome. A 21-0 Broncos victory fueled entirely by defensive and special teams scores. A pick six, a fumble return touchdown, while Bo Nix struggled, completing a low percentage of his passes and missing open receivers downfield. In that scenario, my reaction would align with the skeptic. The defense dominated a bad team. The offense showed nothing new. Our evaluation remains unchanged. The actual, closely contested victory, where Nix demonstrated clear, measurable growth against a formidable opponent, provides a far more encouraging and substantive data point for future projection. That is the analytical lens through which I am viewing the Denver Broncos. This entire discourse exemplifies why sports analysis can be both immensely engaging and occasionally frustrating. Just last week, when the Broncos were perched at number 2 in this analyst's rankings, I merely posed a question. Is second perhaps a bit aggressive? I'm not fully convinced. The reaction from a segment of the Broncos fan base was immediate and severe, with some declaring they would no longer consume my content, as if posing a question or expressing mild skepticism was tantamount to disloyalty, and that only unequivocal, unwavering praise was permissible. Now, with the Broncos demoted to 4th following a hard-fought win, I am engaging in the nuanced conversation about the reasoning behind the shift, and the reactions again seem to gravitate toward extremes. For me, the intellectual process of deconstructing the evaluation is infinitely more interesting than rigidly clinging to a specific numerical slot. In this style of critical commentary, my primary aim is to decipher the underlying logical framework being employed. If a specific set of criteria, quality of opponent, performance under pressure, signs of growth, is used to justify elevating Team A, then why does that same set of criteria not apply, or even apply in reverse, to Team B when they find themselves in a strikingly similar situational context? This exercise in comparative logic is where I derive genuine intellectual enjoyment. I am far less emotionally or intellectually invested in the absolute numerical ranking, debating whether the Broncos are 2nd, 4th, or 6th, as such lists are inherently fluid, subjective, and often contradictory. I could draft a personal top 10 list, wait 60 minutes after consuming more information, and produce a completely different order. The ordinal numbers themselves are ephemeral and often misleading. What holds far greater significance for me is the consistency and soundness of the reasoning process used to arrive at those conclusions. In this specific instance, the explanation provided for downgrading the Broncos, citing concerns that were ostensibly highlighted or exacerbated by a game in which their young franchise quarterback took a demonstrable and significant step forward, does not form a logically coherent argument. One should feel better about the Broncos after such a performance, not worse. One should not suddenly discover profound new concerns about a defense that held firm in a tight, high-leverage contest against a capable offense. The stated rationale seems fundamentally disconnected from the observable evidence on the field. A final, almost meta-observation. This Broncos-Commanders game appears to have vanished into a void within the broader national NFL conversation. For a team that currently holds, for all intents and purposes, the number 1 seed in its conference, a status they maintain through tiebreakers, the lack of substantive discussion or analysis surrounding a thrilling, overtime victory is rather perplexing. It was an entertaining, well-played game featuring several wow throws from Bo Nix that showcased his development. Yet, it's as if the contest has been memory holed. I find that collective silence, that disconnect between the on-field product and the subsequent discourse, to be both notable and puzzling. But these reflections and critiques represent my own analytical perspective and framework. I am genuinely eager to hear your interpretations and conclusions. What is your assessment of the Denver Broncos' current standing? Does a close, hard-fought victory against a competitive Washington team justify a step back in overall confidence? Or, as I have argued, should it be viewed as a step forward that reinforces their credentials? Please share your detailed viewpoints in the comment section below. I read every single comment posted, whether you find yourself in full agreement with my stance or stand in firm, principled opposition. Let's use this as a foundation for detailed, respectful discussion and spirited debate. Ultimately, let's ensure we derive enjoyment from the shared experience of analyzing this complex and compelling sport. please consider subscribing to the channel. We are actively cultivating an engaged, thoughtful, and passionate community here, and I would be thrilled to welcome you as a participant. My aim is to build a digital space where we feel a genuine, collective connection, something we are all authentically excited and proud to be a part of, and I believe we are making meaningful, measurable progress toward that goal. Please do not forget to give this video a thumbs up, as this action tangibly and directly supports the visibility and reach of our content within the platform's algorithm. Thank you so much for your time, your attention, and your engagement. I'll see you next time.